Welcome to Master Surveillant Mindset here on Northwest Digital News. Darin Fredrickson coming to us out of California. Kevin Hunter here and Kyle Torgeson at the broadcast desk. We're going to talk about the police knock and talks that happen around the country. And Darin, this is one of the more significant methods used by law enforcement to even exercise drug busts, is it not?
It is, because we all have rights under the Fourth Amendment, and law enforcement has to abide the Fourth Amendment search and seizure law. And so if they don't have probable cause to do a search, and there's exclusions to that search warrant clause, but in a nutshell, there's a consensual option where somebody can consent to search, and then there's no search warrant required or any probable cause or any law that says you have to search, that gives them the right to search. So consensual searches are very common. If you watch Live PD or Cops or any of those shows, watch one episode of Live PD and you will see them asking consensual search as just a standard business of doing law enforcement.
So let's say somebody does have some kind of illegal substance in their home. Is there any advantage to them allowing that search to be voluntary versus a search that's done with a warrant? Any advantage to the citizen?
The advantage of them consenting
Correct.
to a search? Not really. I mean, a consensual search is the weakest search there is in the legal system, and a search warrant is the very strongest. So if a law enforcement official comes to your door and knocks on your door and says, hey, we have reason to believe whatever the crime may be, drugs is a pretty common crime, and so it's used pretty regularly in drug investigations, but they don't have to consent to the search or allow you to continue on. You could say, you can come back with a search warrant, or I will not let you search unless you have a search warrant. But there's also times when you're at a residence making consensual contact with a person, and all of a sudden probable cause develops, which at that point now things have shifted and they can't say anymore, come back with a search warrant, because now you have evidence where you can get a search warrant. So you kind of freeze the scene and then get a search warrant at that point.
Let's talk about some of the physical pieces of evidence that can lead to probable cause. So share the story about you knock on somebody's front door. You believe that this is potentially a stash house. The guy hands you some marijuana at the front door. Explain that story.
Yeah, so when I worked drug enforcement, I spent a few years working that we call them knock and talk investigations, where they're consensual contacts, and we get 5,000 or 6,000 drug complaints in at least Phoenix metro area, just Phoenix city limits, a year. So I worked in a plainclothes capacity. I would do search warrant surveillance on a house for a given period of time. So we watched this house for a couple of days. It was an anonymous tip that this guy was shipping marijuana out of state. And as you know, Arizona is a source state for drugs, and he was shipping them, I think, to the Midwest. So it was really good information, but it was anonymous, and so I had no follow-up. So what we'll do is we'll try to develop our own information. So surveillance was negative, so I told my partner, I'm like, let's just go knock on the door and talk to this guy. You got to close out your complaint. So we went, approached the door, knocked on the door. Guy from within said, who's outside? I said, Phoenix Police Department, can we talk to you? And so he opened the door, stepped out, like slinked out of the door, like not a normal, like they come out, and you could tell he kind of slinked out as tight as he could between the door and the door frame. And he came out and he said, what's the problem? And I said, well, we have information that you might be a marijuana dealer. And he goes, oh, no. And now what you do is part of this strategy is you watch body language. Like that's where you really, really start learning how people are. And when they start sweating, you can see that their heart rate's up and their pulses or their veins are pulsing, and they're very nervous. Like most people, you're nervous with the police, but not to the extent where you start perspiring. Maybe some people will, but you establish that baseline. I could tell this guy definitely had something going on.
Well, as an example of what you're describing, if you came and knocked on my door inquiring about drugs, I'd say, come on in. I wouldn't be the least bit nervous.
Yeah, most people, and it's one of those things where it is definitely your right to not allow it. And and most people are pretty cooperative, but when you start being defensive right from the start, you start sweating, then you start thinking, oh, maybe there's more to it. But you still have to develop this investigation from
Hmm.
nothing other
Sure.
than a tip. So I'm standing there talking to the guy, and I said, well, as a way of resolving this tip, would you, first of all, would you invite us in your house so we can talk about it, because there's neighbors out here. We don't want them to hear. No, no, I don't want you in my house. I said, okay, well, in order for me to close this complaint out, I need to ensure to my boss that I did my job and that there's not drugs here, because if I can't close it out, I don't know.
Hmm.
And that's one way of knowing, is you just showing me around. And he said, well, I'm not going to show you around my house. I'm not going to let you in my house. And I said, well, okay. We focus on drug dealers. We don't focus on users, because there's so many users, thousands, right? We
Hmm.
focus kind of like on the snake of the head of the snake. We want to know, are you a user or a dealer? Do you maybe just smoke a little bit of pot now and then? Most people at this point, they're going to try to minimize their involvement. Like, this guy could be a drug dealer, right? And so
Hmm.
a user is like, no big deal. So, oh yeah, yeah, I smoke a little bit of weed. So at that point now, you have them basically admitting to, at least in some states, a crime. And so they say, well, how do you smoke it? Oh, I smoke it in a bong. Well, where's your bong? Well, most people, their bong or their pipes in the house. So
Hmm.
you're just trying to develop evidence to obtain probable cause. So he said, yeah, I smoke a little bit of weed. And I usually start with, well, do you have any marijuana here that you use? And he's like, oh yeah, yeah, I do actually. I said, well, do you mind getting that for us? He goes, oh yeah, sure. Hang on a second. He goes into the house, and now by now he's sweating, and he's in there for a good 5 minutes. And my partner's like, he's not coming out. And I'm knocking on the door. Hey, we're out here. Are you going to come back out? And we're about ready to leave. Because
Hmm.
my partner's like, yeah, we're done. All of a sudden he comes out the front door and hands me a brand new baggie with a chunk of marijuana in it. He hands it to me, and I smell it, and it's like fresh. And me being a drug investigator for so many years, I could tell, like, literally it wasn't packaged for sale, like rolled up and tight. Like, it was basically a chunk that came off of a bigger chunk and put in a bag and handed it to me. Well, now I have probable cause. He just removed drugs from his house and handed it to me. So I said, do you have any more, or is this it? He's like, no, that's it. I said, well, I can't go to my boss and show him this little bag until I can confirm there's nothing else in here. Are you sure there's nothing else in here? No, man, this is it. This is it. Like, you can go away now. And I said, I'm sorry, we can't go away, because I don't know there's not more in there. So I said, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to have to get a search warrant. And he goes, oh, okay, whatever. So I had my team come over. We sat by, went to the judge, got a search warrant based on the marijuana he handed me. And we found 600 pounds of baled up marijuana in his closet.
So
And
he
he
did
truly
have a
was,
little bit more.
he had a little bit more. And sure enough, one of the bales, like, he probably wasn't even a user. I don't know. I can't remember. But one of the bales was ripped open, like cut open, and there was a chunk taken off of the bale and put in a baggie. Like, this was marijuana to be shipped into the Midwest. It wasn't his usable
Hmm.
stash by any
Yep.
means. And so yeah, that was a situation where he would not even let us in the front door. Yet he went into his own house, got me a sample of his marijuana, brought it to me, and expected me to go away, believing him.
Hmm.
So believe it or not, people lie all day long to us, and you just look at the body language, and people don't realize how much their body language reveals truly what is going on inside their mind.
Yep.
So that worked out very well, and there's other examples of that where people wouldn't even let us in their house, but we were able to do that same situation. As a matter of fact, um, I can tell you about the situation of the guy with a pipe in his robe.
Okay.
Same situation. This was actually his children, teenage children. One of them was supposedly a drug dealer at the school, and so we went and talked to mom and dad was there, and we said, hey, we're getting information that your son is selling drugs at school, like LSD and ecstasy and some marijuana. And he was like, oh, like my son is not a drug dealer. And now a parent can give consent to search a children's room, like they're a parent, They have authority over their children's room as long as they go in and out of there. So I said, well, I'm not looking at you as a suspect, but your son is being accused of being a drug dealer. Do you mind showing me his bedroom? And he said, no, I'm not letting you in my house. Another situation where he didn't even let me in his house. I said, well, do you use drugs? Because he was very defensive. And he goes, yeah, I smoke a little bit of pot. I go, well, how do you smoke it? And he goes, on a pipe. I go, well, do you have any marijuana here? Oh, no, nope, no marijuana. Well, where's your pipe? He goes, it's in my pocket of my robe in my bedroom. And I said, so it's in your robe? He goes, yeah, I just smoked it like last night and I put the pipe in my robe. I said, well, would you mind getting me that pipe? Because that's a felony in Arizona and you're not supposed to have that pipe. He goes, what do you think I am, stupid? I'm not going to go get you my marijuana pipe. So what did he do? Like, he admitted that he is in possession of a pipe, which is a felony in Arizona, and he wouldn't go retrieve it. But now I have probable cause to go ahead and get a search warrant to get the pipe. And that's all the search warrant's for, is to get the pipe that's used for ingesting a drug. And then I also put the drug, because usually if there's paraphernalia, there's a drug that goes with it. So I put the pipe and any marijuana associated with that pipe. So I got the search warrant. Now, a search warrant still gives me a right to search the entire house and in the son's bedroom, which obviously that's kind of my end game, was to search the son's bedroom. But I went for the pipe. And the son's bedroom was a plethora of drugs. I mean, the kid was a pretty significant drug dealer in the school. And so, being I'm there legally, doing a search legally, anything I find of criminal evidence is also, I can seize that as well. So, so that's a situation where, again, somebody didn't let me in the house, but I went there, and just by talking with people, usually I was successful in getting into a house or doing a search 80% of the time when I talk to somebody. Some were just users, some were dealers. But 80% is that's pretty high when you think about somebody giving you consent to search. Now, of those 80 searches, about half of them resulted in me finding a drug dealer. The other half, they were either unfounded or they were a user. And again, we didn't focus on the users.
Sure. Okay,
it was interesting.
There's situations where somebody is a little bit more savvy than these two. So somebody actually physically hand his drug to you, which is probable cause. So another person admits to having it, and through their own testimony gives you probable cause. Talk about the business owner that came in on an anonymous tip. This guy understands his rights a little bit more, and what was his tactic?
Yeah, so we got a lot of anonymous complaints, and usually we didn't look hard into the anonymous complaints unless the information looked really good. And you could tell when I looked through thousands of complaints, when you got an anonymous complaint that was very specific, and this was a hydroponic grow operation in this guy's shed in his backyard on a bigger property in a very expensive part of Phoenix. We're talking like a multi-million-dollar property. And I looked into this guy, and actually the anonymous complaint said this guy owns boutique shops, which the boutique shops, ironically, are kind of associated with the culture of drug use. And so already, I'm thinking the guy owns boutique shops that are connected with the drug culture, sort of, and he's a wealthy businessman. And so we did some surveillance on his house, and with a businessman, all you're going to do is see him go into his businesses. And so we thought, you know what, we got nothing else. Let's just go talk to the guy and see what he comes up with or what he tells us. So went out there with my partner, knocked on the door. He came out, and he just flat out denied everything. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I have a shed in the backyard, but I don't have any drugs in there. And I obviously asked, can you show me? And he said, if you have a search warrant, you're more than happy to search it. But without a search warrant, I'm not allowing you to look anywhere on my property. We're done. Like we're done. So you would say we failed, that we're unsuccessful. And on paper, we would be like, I didn't arrest him, charge him, seize any drugs or property. But think about him now. Think about him shutting his door after he's done talking to us, knowing that we probably know he's got a hydroponic grow operation in his shed.
Mm-hmm.
And when I leave, if I'm not successful, I tell people, well, I can't close out this complaint because I can't satisfy that there's nothing going on here. And so I'm going to keep this complaint open, and we're going to continue to investigate this, which in this case, we were done, but he shuts the door and we leave. What's going through his mind?
Yeah.
Whoa, game over for me. You think his hydroponic grow operation is going to be staying in that shed much longer?
Not anymore.
No. That thing's gone. And so even when we were unsuccessful, we were still successful. And now the drug dealer knows that we're aware of them, and they're going to be looking over their shoulder. Maybe they'll move on somewhere else. I guarantee this guy wasn't sleeping very well for quite a while, because now he's thinking, how did they know? And do I keep this operation going? Of course he's not. He's got a lot to lose. He's got businesses. And let's say he gets arrested, and now his face is in the local news, and actually in Phoenix, it would be in the big news. He's not going to risk all that over growing his own marijuana. So yeah, we're kind of successful when we are, and even when we're not.
In closing here, just kind of explain the significance of the knock and talk and why that's used. You mentioned that it's actually probably one of the most commonly used tactics by the police to deal with drug trafficking.
It is, because it's safe. You're kind of in control. I worked with a lot of undercover officers that looked really, really deep undercover. I didn't really fit that mold culturally. I just couldn't adapt to work in street level buys. And so I did this approach of doing surveillance and knock and talks, consensual contacts. But like, our unit was more successful than the undercover units. And the reason is an undercover can't necessarily, like, hey, he couldn't go up to this guy and say, hey, I want to buy marijuana, because this guy produced his own probably for him and his friends. And so the undercover role is a lot more limited than the consensual contact role of just asking consent. It's fast. It's easy. Most of your highway patrol in drug source states like Arizona and California, they're very, very adept or very knowledgeable on street interviews, where they pull a vehicle over for whatever traffic infraction. Some of those guys are just, they're looking for drug traffickers.
Sure.
So the consensual contact it's fast, it's easy, and you can pretty much discriminate pretty quickly. And I say discriminate, and is it a user, a trafficker, or is it just a normal citizen? You can kind of get that feeling immediately. And so it's real easy to ask for consent from anybody if you have a suspicion. To get a search warrant is really difficult, and you need probable cause. And so consensual contacts get you to that point where you can get a search warrant or search a vehicle because you now have probable cause. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's the knock and talk used by police here on Master Surveillant Mindset on Northwest Digital News. Thanks, everybody who joined us here on the broadcast. Darin Fredrickson coming out with us from California, but soon to be Arizona. Kevin Hunter and Kyle Torgerson here at the broadcast desk with Northwest Digital News. Thanks, everybody who joined us. Take care.
This concludes today's live programming on Northwest Digital News. Thanks for joining us for this special broadcast. Heard around the world in more than 70 countries on YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, Facebook, and Twitch TV. If you enjoyed a story or guest we had here on Northwest Digital News and would like to strut your stuff on the broadcast, email us today at wainfo2017@gmail.com or call or text to 360-545-3501. We're always interested in unique stories, topics, and guests to share with our worldwide audience. Before you go, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up and comment on the live stream. And for those of you who'd like to financially support the broadcast, you can do so at patreon.com/Northwest Digital News. We thank you for your patronage. On behalf of Chris Bornstead, Kyle Torgerson, Stephanie Hunter, and all the people that made this broadcast possible, I'm Kevin Hunter. Till next time, take care.